We are all set. I think we are live. Yep, we are live on YouTube for our live stream as part of World Access for Higher Education. And I am really excited because I am representing a Global Minded organization in Denver. And the focus for Global Minded is really creating a capable and diverse talent pipeline. And when there was an opportunity, I happened to be on the International Advisory Board. And when there was this opportunity to participate today, I thought, what better way to talk about access than to talk about accessibility and inclusion with these incredible people that are joining me today on the panel. So I'm just gonna go down the board and just have everybody introduce themselves. And then I think we'll really get to start with Stuart because he only has about 20 minutes to join us. And then I feel like we'll just have a really rich conversation about accessibility and inclusion with a huge focus on in regards to access to higher education. So Denise, you wanna do a quick intro?
Sure. Hi, I'm Denise Brody. I wrote a book a long time ago called The Elephant in the Playroom, and I'm now updating it to include the elephant in the conference room or the elephant in the office. So I think this is a great discussion to determine how higher ed globally can work to mentor people coming out of the system and into the workplace. And I write about workplace and disability for Forbes.
Wonderful. Richard, you would like to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much. My name is Richard Streitz. I am the COO of Who Global Communications, and I am very happy to be here. I have an extensive background, 25 plus years in the world of accessibility, ranging from themed entertainment and resorts all the way to reviewing websites and accessibility for corporations and higher education.
Stuart, you're up next.
Thank you very much, Mary Alice. Hi, everybody. I'm Stuart Lawler. I am the business development manager for a company called Sight and Sound, based here in Ireland, in Dublin. We're actually a UK-based assistive technology company, and we're very new to the Irish market. I have about 20 years experience in the assistive technology sector, spent most of that time working in the not-for-profit sector for the National Council for the Blind, and I'm delighted to be here this evening.
Wonderful. And Brian?
Hi, it's wonderful to be here. I am Brian Schulman. I am the founder and CEO of a company called Voice Your Vibe, and I have been disabled most of my life. I have Tourette's syndrome. I was a miracle baby that was 1.5 pounds that wasn't supposed to live. So I've spent my whole life dealing with things like accessibility in many different ways, both from my younger schooling into college. So just bringing a different flavor to the conversation.
I'm so excited. Well, I'm really proud that we are bringing this this focus and this angle to World Access to Higher Ed Day. And I was fortunate enough to meet Stuart last April at the DigCit Summit in Ireland. And I know that Stuart has about 20 minutes that I think he's 5 hours ahead of me here on the East Coast. So I'm really happy that he's able to join us. But Stuart, I'd really love to get your perspective. Whether it's going to be your own personal story, any tips or advice about your journey, your Sight and Sounds organization on this journey to really inform and empower people.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mary Alice. And yes, we're 5 hours ahead here in Dublin. And apologies for having to leave early because I thought the event was on tomorrow, so something else has come up for this evening. But I suppose there's probably a couple of things that spring to mind. My own personal journey, I should have probably said, and it was only when Brian was introducing himself, that I also so I'm blind. I'm totally blind. So I have had a disability since birth. I've been, I suppose, when I talk about technology, I say that I think technology is the greatest enabler for people with disabilities. It really equalizes the playing field for us. None so more than in higher ed, I think. When you're in a mainstream, fast-paced environment, where you really need to be able to get access to information quickly. It's crucial that you not only have assistive technology, but you have the appropriate assistive technology and the training. Myself, I came from a semi-segregated education background in my high school or secondary school education, and went to university in the mid-90s to study music. And then I realized very quickly that when you have a music degree, whilst it's really interesting, you don't actually make a lot of money unless you're very good. And I wasn't very good. So I decided to go into the whole technology field. And that was partly because I enjoyed, in a voluntary capacity, supporting people and watching how people learn. One of the things I've seen over the years is the importance of training and support, not just for end users of assistive technology, whether you're in school or higher ed, but for people who support them and work with them and provide the ancillary services within the college to make all this technology work. So there's been so many times that I've been involved in situations where the IT people just don't know, because there's this huge fear of assistive technology. Within Sight and Sound, a big part of our business and a big part of our focus is the education market, both school, further, and higher ed. And what we're seeing, and indeed this has been the trend probably in the last 10 or so years in Ireland and in the UK, what we're seeing is greater access to funding, equipment being made available earlier on in the academic year, which is a huge thing, and a better streamlined process between an assessment and a piece of technology being purchased. And I think in particular for the blind and low vision community, there can often be a situation where somebody has low vision and they're going through an assessment, or they're trying to apply for funding for a piece of technology. By the time the funding comes through, their vision has changed or has deteriorated to such a degree that the technology they were being assessed for is no longer valid. So there's challenges there around educating the funders to make sure that they understand the impact that this technology will have, and that there's enough flexibility in an assessment process or a funding process so that change of mind or change of circumstance can be taken into consideration. And the last thing I would probably say is that we need to be conscious at all times of making learning platforms and learning systems accessible. So there's a lot more people taking, I suppose, flexible and distance learning options, which are really good, but they bring with them significant challenges. So online systems that we look at every day with screen reading and magnification technology and refreshable braille devices, that can pose significant obstacles for people, in some cases so much so that people will end up walking away from a course. So as we, I suppose, advocate and lobby for increased access and increased awareness, and obviously ultimately to increase the numbers of people in higher ed and increase the numbers of people in employment, we need to make sure that the systems to get them there can be used appropriately and fully with the technologies that we are using ourselves. There's been huge strides and very positive and welcome strides over the last, I suppose, again, 10 years in the mainstream sector with Apple, Google, Microsoft, and many others making their devices accessible out of the box. It's been positive on a couple of ways. First of all, that people can actually go into a store and buy something and use it. And indeed, we've seen lots of iPads now in the classrooms, and people are using them with the accessibility features. But also, it's forced, I suppose, it's forced the sector in which I work to sort of have a bit of a shift in how it does things, and in particular that is probably relevant with regard to price. So we welcome all these things, because one of the things we see a lot of is mixing assistive and mainstream technology together. So connecting something like, for example, a braille display to an iPad to get a fully accessible system for somebody who might be hard of hearing and is also blind. So I think we're always at an exciting time with technology. There's always new things happening, but we're at a very exciting time in merging all these pieces together and enabling further and increased access to higher ed. But as I said early on, making sure that the people who make these key decisions on funding and service developments have an awareness of the huge value of this technology. Thank you.
Stuart, I feel like I learned something specific when I got to meet you at Trinity in April. And I feel like David Pollard has since continued to help me on this, but simple things like for social media and tweet, can you share how, because even when I feel like people are very mindful and aware, they still don't know. So if you were tagging a picture for a tweet, you would be able to see the picture. So could you just give, because I feel like that's such a practical tip that all of us should know about, because
so absolutely. So you know, and I suppose there's basic things like and Twitter actually have it on their web-based interface now, that you can describe your picture. And I think Twitter are sort of encouraging people, or at least they certainly were promoting the feature when they brought it out, asking people to please put a description on their picture before they upload it. Of course, Facebook has some AI that's making an attempt to do that automatically now. So one thing that comes to mind was that a friend of mine on Facebook a while ago was showing people a picture of a cake she had done earlier on, and Facebook called it a dessert. So you know, that's pretty good that this AI is starting to kick in to help us to describe these things. Sometimes people will put text in a picture and put it up on their social media, and of course for visually impaired or those of us with low vision, it's extremely difficult. Yes, there are applications that will interrogate that image and try to extract text from it, but they're not always readily available on the same platform or the same computer or the same tablet that we're using our social media on. So greater awareness, Mary Alice, as you say, of tagging is really important.
You know, and I had also learned about hashtags. I think in a former life, I might have been E.E. Cummings. I love to write in lowercase, but I because of you, because of David Pollard, the fact that if I was to write world access, I should capitalize the W and I should capitalize the A, because there are readers. Can you describe that? Because I just think that's fascinating.
Yeah, so there's a range of assistive technology, and we call these screen readers, that essentially take text from the computer screen as it's traveling to the computer screen. They take the text and they will verbalize it, but they speak with synthesized speech. So yeah, things like world access, for example, if you write that in all lowercase, it'll say something like world access. So when you capitalize the W and the A, the screen reader knows that it needs to make a differentiation between those two words, even though they're not two words. The capital letters being at the start of each word is enough.
I just think such an easy for all of us. I don't think I would have been aware of that unless I had met you last April. So thank you so much for that. I know it's about 17 after the hour and you needed to leave within a few minutes. Were there anything that the rest of the panelists would like to ask you quickly, or final words? I'll see if any of the panelists have anything.
Sure. I mean, all I want to say is, again, thank you for the opportunity. It's a great event, great initiative. We're delighted at the Sight and Sound to have been able to participate. I'm sorry I couldn't have stayed longer. And I think crucially, the more people that we can get talking about these things and sharing experiences and learning from what we're doing in our respective countries, our institutions, our organizations, our companies, you know, then the better. So creating conversations as you've done is fantastic, Mary Alice. So thank you for the opportunity and thank you for creating the space today.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us, Stuart.
Thank you very much. A pleasure. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you, Stuart.
Bye, Stuart.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart.
Okay, I'm so glad that we were able to get Stuart's voice in. And when I just realized too, I never introduced myself at the beginning of this webinar. I'm Mary Alice Curran, and I'm the founder of the Digital Citizenship Institute. I am a proud untraditional learner who was diagnosed. I feel like that is like the worst word in the world. Diagnosed probably when I was in the first grade. They used the R word back then to my parents. But lo and behold, through outside testing, this is in the late 70s, my parents, we found out that I'm dyslexic and dysgraphic. And that label, which is another horrible word, has followed me my entire academic career. It went from, class to class. Each teacher would get that file. And very little was ever expected of me. And college was never really ever going to be an option, except I just happened to have parents that supported, decisions. And so I want to give a shout out to the University of Arizona, because I really honed in on my skills as an untraditional learner through their SALT program, which is the Strategic Alternative Learning Techniques Center. And that really was a game changer for me. And so when we had this opportunity to have this panel, I was really proud to be able to have a voice in the accessibility and inclusion conversation. And so that's like my little intro, but and I know that most of you know that story about me. So I just am interested in that. This is just an opportunity now that it's down to the four of us, since Stuart had to leave, a great opportunity for some conversations. So.
Well, I have to say that your story, especially through the lower grades, actually is very similar to my experience. And the schools I went to didn't have any such of those sorts of programs, especially the one you mentioned at Arizona State. But it's interesting how I chose to deal with that. It's again, they didn't use the R word when I was in primary school, but they were talking about holding me back. My parents refused that, and I pushed through, and it was certainly that I just learned differently than everyone else. And the school just wasn't able to handle that at the time. The way I dealt with it was actually just getting involved and doing things in the school that didn't necessarily require me to be attending class. And so I sort of wove my way through education, being on the periphery of just doing things that were useful and valuable to either the school or the class operation in general, without necessarily, and this would give me a large breath with the instructor to just let it go, to let me go through. And I think it was through the process of all that led me to the industries that I ended up leaning toward, which was live performance, theater, and entertainment, and music. And it's interesting what Stuart said about his departure from music as a career, because I actually experienced very much the same thing. Music was my mom was a concert pianist, and I grew up with music just around me, so it's something that's near and dear, and still very much so near and dear to my heart. But as a career path, I ultimately had to part ways with that, because of the harsh realization is that to make a living at it as a studio musician and so forth, it's basically a birthright, especially in the LA, Southern California market. And that was just something that was just never going to happen to me. So I focused all my energies in live entertainment and theater, and that pushed me on through many, many different careers that all stemmed from that. But that's the way I sort of dealt with that in my way, of not necessarily having the programs in place, which is why I feel so strongly now that it's absolutely critical that we create the tools and create the programs that allow individuals who are in that same situation that you and I found ourselves at the younger age, to be able to naturally pursue any discipline, any that they feel compelled to pursue, whether it's the sciences and so forth. And I think we have now the ability and the tools to be able to do that. So that's one of the reasons why I feel so strongly about how in the educational process, starting at the primary and at the high school level, and having those tools that transition allow those individuals to be carry over into the higher education and into the professional careers, the consistency and level of those tools. And to that point, I think it's really great that we see the platform manufacturers of tablets and smartphones and so forth weaving in accessibility into the framework of how they operate, that allow sort of a base platform that as apps and industries create things, they sit already on sort of a foundation of accessibility that's built into these hardware, and I think that helps a lot with being able to, as individuals transition from one education level to another, that they have that level of familiarity with these tools, that they transition from education to professional careers.
Denise, I really feel like that is your area, that bridge then from not just to get, to higher ed, but from higher ed to the workplace as well.
Yeah.
You can't just be, I got into college. I got myself into the university.
So it's interesting listening to everyone talk about their personal stories, because I often tell my personal story as having a lot to do with my son. I somehow managed, scrappy Denise Brody managed to get into college, get into the workforce, never having been diagnosed with ADHD, dysgraphia, any sensory issues, working memory issues. There's so many things that people just missed. And I think we're living in a different time, which is amazing. So when I looked back just to date myself, when I looked back at the research, there was nothing major happening in diagnosing ADHD in girls in particular between 1950 and 1980. Okay, so there you go. I just basically was left on my own. I drank a lot of coffee. I asked for a lot of help. And then I went to a very non-traditional workplace, which was as a magazine editor. And I think everybody there probably fell on some, learning disability scale, and they fully embraced it. And I did too. Now that's not how I grew up. So the flashpoint, the really cool thing about this is I have a 22-year-old son. And when he was about to be a junior in high school, he said, I'm not going to college. I just don't see it. And that freaked everyone out. How could he not go to college? What were the options? I think it's important to say that there's so many options for kids now that going into higher ed can be a stepping stone. You could go to a school closer to home, a community college to start and then transfer. You could go into an apprenticeship program. There's a million ways to go about getting your higher education now. Not a million, but there's also a lot of cool funding for people, scholarships for people with disabilities and learning disabilities. So I would encourage people to look around, to Google around and look what fits for them, because everybody's clearly different. It's so interesting to hear Richard and Stuart talk, and I know Brian will say the same thing. The line, my parents refused that. My parents refused to accept that. I didn't have that. My parents were both psychiatrists. My mom was an educator. We just were a highly competitive family. And so I tried to flip the script, and they're fabulous people, by the way, but I tried to flip the script and say to my son, I am going to be your advocate, and I will continue to be your advocate. Anything you need. We literally moved 150 miles away to go to the proper school. And he's now in arts college, which is perfect for him. He's at Massachusetts Art. And he feels very much at home there. But one of my last points is, while our parents wouldn't have it, right? We're going into a workplace. We're sending these kids into a workplace. They don't have their parents. There's no helicopter parenting in the workforce. There shouldn't be, right? So you have to be your own advocate, and whatever it is, somehow I think the idea of internalizing that it's not a disability, it's a different way of doing things, will then help you advocate for yourself, because you need to do your best work. And if you can't, that's nobody's problem but yours. So practice in higher ed. Let's make sure that everybody gets that support in higher ed, and that kids have college students have the mindset that right now 92% of kids in the US do not ask for services. Why? Maybe because they don't at college, maybe because they're just a little on the fence about it. So I think higher ed's job is to meet these people in the middle, and they're doing that, and to say, this is what we have available for you. It's a different way of doing things. We understand you and the way you learn. So, I think it takes both sides, both the parents and now the kids, and also the IT people and career services, to say, we're all going to be open about this. We're going to talk about it as a difference. And it's something that you should be proud of. And everybody here is a great example of that pride. So thank you for showcasing that pride today, Mary Alice, because I think it's so important. I spent a lot of time building that in my son, and I don't take that much credit for it, but because he's an awesome kid, but I can't imagine him without it, frankly. So you have to, if you don't have a parent who understands you in higher ed, maybe it's a teacher, maybe it's a career services person that gets you into that mode, but find a mentor, because coming in and out of higher ed, in both places, you're going to need someone who understands you.
That is the truth. Denise, you and I have talked about this a lot. And, I wish that expression about the input, a wise head on young shoulders, like, that one thing that was what I perceived as my greatest weakness, and I'm going to guess everybody here is going to say the same thing, that like it was my greatest weakness, ends up being my greatest strength. And so I wish that I had that foresight, earlier on in my own academic career. But when you're just even talking about mentors, and like the one voice that I just noticed that I have to advocate for are professors, right? Mm-hmm. So our instructors need to be more mindful about different, like, untraditional learners, and
we don't just know.
Right.
You can't assume anything. Someone can be very bright, very well-meaning. It could be a fabulous school, but they just haven't been trained to understand that. So I think one point that all of us have is we're pretty upbeat about what we know and what we don't know. I don't call it a superpower. I'm not a superhero. I don't think it's a gift. It's who I am. And I think you can talk about yourself having a gift or a superpower as a kid, but when you get into higher ed and the workforce, people don't care about your superpower. They just want you to do the work. And I may sound mean saying that, but I truly believe you have to have a different kind of mindset and a different set of mentors as you transition from higher ed in and out of higher ed. So thanks. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, but I know you and I have talked about this a lot. Brian, we're dying to hear your voice on all of this.
I have so many things to say about so many things said. So I'm going to try and do this in a way that doesn't take up our time. Okay, so, we're talking about a level of awareness, right? So if I go back to the start of what Denise was saying, my mom knew there was something wrong. Well, I came out fighting for every breath just to make it into this world in the 70s, and being a pound and a half was not a normal thing. So it truly was a miracle. To the other side, getting diagnosed with a neurological disorder preteen, there were years that my mom knew there was something wrong with me, but every doctor we went to said, oh, he's fine, he'll grow out of it, because nobody had an answer. And my mom, the stubborn, amazing woman that she is, said, no, I'm going to find a doctor who actually knows what they're talking about and will give me an answer. And we eventually wound up at UCLA Medical Center. And Richard, I grew up in LA, by the way.
Okay.
And we found a specialist that said this words, Tourette syndrome. And it was very new. And there was no, they told us there's no way to fix this. There's no cure. You're going to have this for life. And yet they had these experimental drugs, which were supposed to help as a calming mechanism. So I wound up taking these for a while, horrible side effects. I wound up falling asleep in class for 30 minutes at a time. And I did not tell my teachers, this is what I have, right? To Denise's point of, if they don't know, then they're going to just think you're a latchkey kid and you're not paying attention, right? Why aren't you getting enough sleep? What's wrong with you? When I got diagnosed, I stood up in front of my class. I believe it was 6th grade. And I told my teachers and the parents and my classmates, this is what I have. I don't have some contagious disease and you're not going to catch it, but this is what it is. And I certainly dealt with a lot of bullying and adversity growing up because of my Tourette's. And for those that aren't aware of Tourette's syndrome, they're uncontrollable tics and twitches that range all across the board. And my height of it, somersaulting from room to room, jumping up and down, multiple facial expressions, multiple noises and auditory, intense neck twitches. And the thing is, when you're doing them, A, you're not aware you're doing them, and B, they're uncontrollable. So you can imagine when you have a disability, and Denise, when you were talking about the words superpower and gift, I agree and I disagree. I agree because you can't go through life going, I'm different, so I deserve more attention. I can tell you right now that I did not talk about Tourette's in my life. I could probably count on one hand the amount of times I talked about it with people, because all I wanted to be was normal.
Right.
I wanted to be like everybody else. I didn't want to be different. I didn't want to be treated different. And I certainly didn't want to be given anything. I wanted to earn everything in school, in business, in life. And I certainly had a hard time in school. You know, I had a really hard time retaining information. I know Denise, you and me and Mary Alice, we've all talked about this. And and I certainly was an untraditional learner. My mom would sit up with me until the wee hours of the night, and we would learn by doing sing-song. Like, I could not retain information to do tests. Like, I was a horrible test taker. But by doing that, it allowed my memory, and I'm a musician, Stuart, Richard. I grew up playing music my whole life. My grandfather was a studio musician actually in LA his whole life. And music has been a big part of my life as a natural calming mechanism. But from a schooling perspective, you know, I think there was a need for me to have extra attention. I did grow up in a private school system until my high school years, where I said to my mom, I need to be around more people. I was not the social butterfly that most people know me as today. I was more reserved. I was the last kid to get picked on the team and all that stuff. And I think this is an important thing too, because anyone that has a disability in any system you are in, and I don't believe they are disabilities. I do believe they are powers that we have. They are gifts we have been given that make us who we are. They make us who we are. And everyone has those, whether you have issues or of any kind or not. But I think the point is that awareness is key. Awareness and technology are key. I went to San Diego State. I was supposed to go to U of A. And then I wound up going and visiting San Diego State and fell in love with the school and the campus. And it was a part of me. And I took advantage of their disability program. And these people were incredibly helpful. You know, you have counselors that sit down with you and they spend time with you. Again, going through my schooling, that one-on-one attention was incredibly helpful. For someone who's a scatterbox and I just have a hard time retaining information, it's like squirrel every which way. And so that was really helpful for me when I was getting started in my university schooling. And then I actually decided that after, I think I did it just my freshman year, maybe into my sophomore, and then I said, okay, I'm good. I can walk my path now. But it was really helpful coming in, and I think any freshman going into their schooling years of a university, they're kind of like, okay, this is really big and scary, and I don't know what to do, or where to go, or who to talk to. You know, it's like any new adventure. But especially when you have a disability, having that extra help is a great thing. So again, I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but so now the other thing was, I did actually get held back in kindergarten, Richard. And I don't remember everything wrapped around it, but I was always the oldest kid, and that's basically why. First to get my driver's license amongst everybody, because I was the older one. And mentoring, something that I know Denise is really passionate about, especially in the workplace, as am I believe we get to where we are in life by people setting the ladder down, whether it's assistance with our disabilities through life. My mom is my rock, my genuine hero. I can tell you right now, I never would have gotten through everything I went through as a kid if I didn't have her by my side. And all of the mentors that have been a part of my life, not knowing what I've been through in my life. I literally just a year ago, guys, got onto LinkedIn Video and told my life story for the first time ever. And that was a really scary thing to do for so many different reasons, right? 575 million business professionals, and you're putting yourself out there like that and sharing those things. But I was inspired by other people that were sharing their stories about speech impediments, about other disabilities that they have. It's really brave to not only do that one-on-one, but to actually do that in front of a wide audience. And in my mind, literally up until that point, I didn't look at my life as, wow, that's incredible what you've been through. How did you deal with all of that? You know, to me, it was, as you would probably all appreciate, it's just life. We don't think of it as anything other as we just get up and we keep doing what we're doing. And yet our stories have the ability to positively affect people in every environment. So whether it's, you know, and by the way, one other thing I want to mention on this topic is, and I did take advantage of funding and scholarships and such from an educational perspective, because I needed to, any which way I could. And informing and empowering people is really important for the reasons we talked about. Tell your teachers, let them know what's going on so that they're aware. So that way they are able to inform their students so that they're aware. And you're able to cut these things off of the past that many of us had to deal with growing up as kids and even as adults when it comes to things like bullying in any environment it may be. So between technology and awareness, it's critical. And I know that every single one of us on this panel and every single person that's watching this right now, you have a voice and a voice that matters and a story that matters. Whether you have a disability or not, share those things with people because you have the ability to affect others in a very positive way, both in the educational system and in the world as a whole.
Okay, I just love that. And I even want to just like tag in on that about as a kid, I became the class clown because I didn't want anybody to know that I was different than anybody else. And I perfected being a class clown and was in a lot of trouble from kindergarten to 12th grade and a horrible student. But I look at now and I look at like different tools, even when Stuart was on talking about like different tools or different platforms. My gosh, if I had had that when I was younger, it would have been different. But the fact is, from a classroom perspective and as a classroom teacher and as a former college professor, when you think about all these different tools and how they can help all different types of learning, abilities, if we are open and transparent about that, then there's nothing about that shame that, we carried when we were kids. There's a celebration about how everybody learns in their own unique way, no matter what your disability or your ability. I mean, everybody comes to school with gifts and talents. And I feel like it is our responsibility to really like highlight and promote everybody's gifts and talents. So to go with that, tell your story. It's just the fabric of life. It's powerful.
It is. It's really powerful. Go ahead, Denise.
Oh, I just wanted to say, to bring it back to global Minded, I was looking at their recent report, and it said that 32% of countries haven't defined a specific position or policy on inclusion. And so I think, we're all talking about how we can push forward with our stories, but also there has to be, from a larger perspective, and this ropes in everybody, teachers and assistants and administrators, there has to be some recognition and some, not a label, but some level of awareness that's acceptable. And I think that we're really, as we give our own stories, sometimes we get people confused about, like, wait, so what do we need to do? It's so confusing. There's so many people. How could I do this? But basically, in the end, I think what Global Minded also wants is to have some bar that's raised and to get there and to be specific. So I would also say, tell your story, but also be specific about how your university or your mentor can help you.
I think that's a really important point, Denise, is that establishing a baseline, a definition of what accessibility is, so that some ground rules can be both discussed at a playing level globally across many nations, as well as policies being established and strategies being established from that baseline that's created. And clearly, universal definitions need to be created that fit and work within the numerous different cultures that exist. As we know, cultural sensibilities differ from nation to nation and so forth. And so it's important to be able to establish and create a dialogue that can be had using a very broad and universal definition about what accessibility and accessibility awareness needs to be. So, absolutely, I think that's something that is critical to help move forward greater global awareness, especially in the transition from the education onto professional career paths and into the workplace. Because in many ways, I think those are two very, very separate equations that people work on separately without necessarily tying the two together. And again, this is where technology comes in as being sort of that bridge that helps establish the connection between the two. Certainly mentorship and apprenticeship, which is something that I know I've talked before with other individuals and groups, is the idea and concept that for many countries, the idea and concept of apprenticeships are still very standard. Here in the US, we've done away with them. And so the idea of having someone that is coming out of school to have a mentor or someone to help and guide them transition through that process of getting into the workforce is something that we really need to reestablish, both not only at just a trade level, and most people, when they think of apprentice, they think of trades, but apprenticeships work at all levels and all business sectors. It's something that I think would also help with creating and spreading the awareness of this, of accessibility in general.
I was on mute. I wanted to know, I'm looking at our time and we've got about like 15 minutes, and I just want to know, and I'm going to go off of Denise, you just got us going on this path, some final thoughts about where do I go? Where are the resources? What can I do? I know that we are participating in World Access for Higher Education, and we chose to go with this focus on accessibility and inclusion, but what might be, I can tell you, I'm really excited about December 3rd. Richard, you want to share? Because I know that RU Global is a huge supporter for this.
Sure. On December 3rd, the Purple Light Up initiative, which is a global movement to help create and spread awareness about accessibility and persons with disability in general. This is a worldwide movement to which Deborah Rue is an ambassador here in the United States with, and working with the State Department and various government organizations and agencies here in the US, tying them with organizations in Wales and in Europe and so forth, to really help and create and shine, and this is where the purple light comes in, to really make create a giant global awareness to this, how important it is to understand accessibility and persons with disabilities to be able to have the options and abilities to have, to sit and function in like classrooms and in the educational systems, in the workplace, and in just general everyday life within cities, and having the opportunities that everyone else has. So that's in a nutshell, that's certainly what that movement is all about on December 3rd. And there's going to be lots of activities all over the world in conjunction with that movement.
What's that hashtag? I want to make sure that we share that hashtag out.
It's hashtag Purple Light Up.
Okay, and then the other hashtag that I really enjoy, I don't join in on a regular basis, but the AX, I'm not going to.
Access Chat. Yeah, yes. It's hashtag AXSCHAT, Access Chat. And that is the single largest globally attended forum on a weekly basis, and it has been now for a number of years, every single Tuesday, 3 o'clock Eastern time. And you have a giant collection of individuals from all over the world, leaders, thought leaders, industries, corporate leaders that attend and share ideas and thoughts about accessibility and inclusion. Every week there's a guest that is chosen, again, from any number of different industries. They're oftentimes respected leaders and recognizable names. There's generally a topic, but it's just a giant open global forum. And again, it's every Tuesday, rain or shine, holiday or not, at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hashtag AXSCHAT.
Perfect. Denise, I know you've got to have loads of resources.
I do. I was struggling to think of one particular thing. I guess if you're trying to figure out in the U.S. what is compliance, and then what is going above and beyond for a university, there's several groups, university groups, that deal with disability and accessibility. But I think one of the great resources for me recently has been understanding from the AAPD, American Association of People with Disabilities, what are the ways that you can advocate for yourself, and what can you do it in a legislative way? Can you do it in a community way? Can you do it in a university setting? And when you go there, you just see the basics of how to begin an advocacy movement for people with disabilities. And it's a good education. It may not exactly help you in particular, but it puts you in the mindset that you're not alone. There are a lot of people, and that you can Google your way to the right thing, whether it's something for low vision or ADHD or wheelchair accessibility. The idea that going beyond compliance, what the ADA, what's expected of us as a rule since 1990 for 28 years, public spaces need to be accessible, but that doesn't mean everybody's really going anywhere beyond that. And so when you go on to a site like AAPD or listen to AXS Chat, you realize you're not alone. There are a lot of people bending the system to their needs, and it's doable. And sometimes it's a long journey, but there's no better way to start than figuring out what is the starting point in the US for your disability, and what are people doing now so that you can advocate for more.
And I would add, you might not say, I would say follow Denise Brody, because I feel like your articles that you feature on Forbes are just absolutely tremendous resources. So I would say for a starting point, you're my go-to. So
well, that scares me a little bit.
I might be biased because I've known you and we're both in Connecticut, but I really, you're a beautiful writer, and you are such a champion for people.
And I also would say, if you contact me at D Brody, at Twitter, certainly there are many people out there looking for resources, and I'm happy to spread those if you have a site or a chat that you want other people to know about. That's what I do as a reporter at Forbes. I was brought on simply to write about disability in the workplace and to be a resource. So I'm happy to help and spread anybody's word. It's not really about what I'm doing, it's about what other people are doing. So.
Well, you're an amazing curator. So yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This is great.
Brian, what do they say about saving the best to last?
I don't know. It depends who you ask. So a couple things. One, I absolutely agree with what you said, Mary Alice. Denise is incredible. I was fortunate to be interviewed by Denise for an article with regards to disability in the workplace. Take your hands off your face. She's an amazing human being. She's an incredible writer, so you have to read her stuff. And she really is all about others and the voice of others. I will say the Tourette's Association of America, if you look it up, you can find them on LinkedIn, you can find it on the web. There is tons of information. I want to give a shout out to my Twitch brother, Jake Melton, who is another advocate of the Tourette's Association of America, and someone who advocates for those that have Tourette's. And look, a lot of folks aren't aware that they have these things. I think the more awareness, the better in terms of inclusion, in terms of accessibility. And I do think universities as a whole are getting better about putting it on the forefront of what accessibility there is for students that have disability. I think it can always improve. And I would love to continue to see that evolve because it's just the nature of life. Things are always changing. So we need to be changing with them so that we can help others be better, faster, and stronger. But I will also say, since we're tying it up, you were all amazing. And it was such an honor to be able to speak with all of you on this panel. So thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm really honored.
What I'll do is I'll make sure that all contact information will go into that final link. I know if people are watching this live stream now, or this is something that will be, a visual asset, I will add everybody's contact information and how to best reach all of you with some links. But I know, Brian, that you had given a shout out to your mom, right? And I just thought a really nice way, I just want to give a shout out. Well, if it weren't for my parents, then none of this, right? But I realize not everybody has that support from home. I know that what Denise had said about the importance of just finding someone. And so I wanted to give out a shout out to Kevin Marvel. If you follow me on Facebook, I gave a shout out to him last night. He was one of my tutors at the University of Arizona at the SALT Center. And, he actually saw something that I didn't see in myself. I still was the class clown that, I don't know, was probably in college because of the social scene at that point, not necessarily the academic scene. And I want to thank, there have been just those few people. I had a student teacher. I had to take Latin 1 twice. I had a student teacher that, saved me in Latin 1 the second time. Just some really remarkable mentors that helped me see, hey, maybe my parents aren't just saying this about me. Maybe I actually am really smart. So along those ways, if you wanted to give out a shout out before we end, I just think that'll be a nice way.
Well, absolutely. Certainly a common theme as everyone was talking is that, big shout out to mothers, right? We couldn't live without them. And so I think that's really says a lot that a support structure, a home support structure is also so important in helping make sustainable anything that happens outside in the school, especially going through the school progression. You got to have certainly a positive and supportive home structure to allow that, and moms tend to fall in that category, very naturally. I also have to certainly give a big shout out to my wife, who has been with me 30 plus years now, and I could not have done a single thing without her behind the scenes, keeping me fed and keeping me on the straight. So I certainly appreciate and love my dear wife, and of course Deborah Rue, who I have known now for 8 or 9 years, and have working with her. And Deborah Rue is a very successful thought leader in the space. Has been certainly a tremendous mentor to me.
Is it my turn? I'm not going to say my mom, although she's a lovely person. I shout out to dads and grandparents, because when I took Toby out of school, my dad retired several years later. He's a doctor. He has learning disabilities. And the three of us were thick as thieves. And I'm a single mom. And I think that seeing this, he's just a very good mentor in general, but his connection with my son, I just shows you can go, you can go anywhere and find your mentor. And not that he was an unexpected mentor, because he's just always been that way, but don't rule out people who grew up in a different time frame, or who are different from you. There was no diagnosis for my dad. I was the one who said, I think you have some sort of issue. and it goes down the line. But I think I've learned a ton, and a shout out to everybody who's spoken to me as a reporter and braved telling their complete story to the world, because if you didn't do that, I would have nothing to write. So a shout out to anybody who says, in some small way, I'm going to tell someone, even if you don't say what you have or are not comfortable with that, you can still stick up for somebody. And especially in the workplace, or a roommate, or in class. So I think we all have the ability to be mentors. I'm a mom, so I love moms, but I think there's a lot of mentors out there in different shapes, sizes, and forms. So that's it. And thank you, Mary Alice. Thank you, everyone, for your stories. And it's just,
I can't thank you enough. I'm so proud that we took this angle for World Access to Higher Ed. I'm really, really proud. And I thank you for, sharing your time, your passion, your expertise. I mean, I know that this is the foundation. Accessibility and inclusion is the foundation of everything that I've ever wanted to do in my life. It's at the base, and when you realize the power in numbers, that we really are better together. So thank you so much for joining us. And I feel like honestly, might be seeing you in Denver in June for Global Minded, because I think that what we've just done is a great opportunity to continue that conversation at their annual conference and continue that awareness. So,
so Mary Alice, will you just say the Global Ed hashtag one more time?
For Global Minded?
Yeah.
Or for what we're doing today?
For both.
Okay, so Global Minded is global, and then mind, and then the ED is capitalized. And I believe on Twitter, they have the ORG connected to it.
Right.
So Global Minded ORG, but they are out of Denver. And that's, why I wanted to put this together was, to represent Global Minded. But then the World Access for Higher Education, their hashtag is WAHE 2018.
Okay, that's the one I did.
And that, I feel like that organization is based out of the UK, but events for the next, 24 hours are happening. Different areas and different locations are putting on events. So we just happen to be one of many, but I'm really proud of the angle that we all chose to share today.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you all.
Thank you. See you soon.
All right, terrific. And I'll make sure everybody gets these links out, and then I add all the ways to contact you individually as well as your organizations.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great.
All right,
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.